Hi, this is Dena Tollefson, and welcome to my studio. I'm so glad to have you here today. Today's video, I'll be demonstrating how to use the grid method with graphite to create a drawing that can be used for a drawing or for a painting. And then I'm also going to be showing you how to work on a painting by first laying in your darkest darks and your lightest lights. So let's get started. Well, today's video is the Totally Awesome Challenge. So it's a challenge that I'm hosting out here on my channel. And if you're new to my channel, I say welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. If you've come back again, I hope that you'll be ringing that subscription bell. My channel is all about spreading joy through art. So I'm hosting a thing called the Totally Awesome Challenge, and it's where you'll make a frog or a toad in your own style. And I'm so excited to see all of the artwork that the other artists are going to be coming up with. So I started with a drawing from Pixabay.com, and I like Pixabay because they've got a lot of drawings that you can use where the photographer has posted their photo of their subject, and you can use it without infringing on anyone's copyright or royalty, that type of thing. So the photographer here is named Skeeze, and this came out of Pixabay.com. So I am using acrylics all here from Golden. These are heavy bodied acrylics, and I'm using just a round brush, first laid in all of the darkest areas using dioxazine purple, and now using pure white, I'm looking at the photo and finding where the very lightest areas are on my subject, and I'm indicating those in white. Some of those areas are going to be covered up later with a color or glazed over with a color, but it's important to find those darkest areas and those lightest areas in the painting, finding those in the reference photo. And also, when you look for a good reference photo, if you can find one that has a nice set of light areas, dark areas, and middle tones, that will make a pleasing pattern. Now you see me swishing out my paintbrush in some clean water. I'm using a Masterson Sta-wet palette with my acrylics, so there's a little sponge under there, and it keeps the acrylics at just the right humidity level when painting. So let's start on this little guy's eye here, and his eye is red, but I'm putting orange in the middle so that I can get the effect of three-dimensionality. In the photo I can see that the roundest, lightest part of his eye is appearing orange. So I'm going to go ahead and put the colors in that I see. There's just a small area of the eye that I would actually call red. So that'll be red, and the other areas I'm seeing as dark. So I'll try and put it in just as I see it. Just using that same round brush, and now adding a little of the purple, the dioxazine purple. This is the same purple that was used in the shadow. I really want to emphasize the eye, the three-dimensionality of the eye. His eye really kind of pokes out and makes a big ball-like shape. I want to try and really emphasize that in the painting. So here I'm using a little bit of Mars Black that I chose to use in the shadow area purple rather than black. So there's only going to be just a tiny little bit of black in this painting, straight black, and that'll be on the actual eye itself, right in this little spot here, and then in that little tiny section around the eye. I do like to include black in every painting that I do when possible, but I don't want to have too much black in the paintings. That's why I'm choosing that kind of purple color instead. Now coming in with a little bit of Ultramarine Blue, just straight out of the tube. Now I made a mistake here, so I took a wet brush. I'm just going to wipe out the excess paint, just like that. There we go. Now I'm going to mix up a gray using the titanium white, Mars black, and then that small amount of yellow ochre. And I can mix this gray color just right on the brush. So coming around the eye, I can see that I don't want to try and use that same bright white color because that part of the eye is in shadow. So that's why I'm using this gray color. Alright, and then this blue is Phthalo blue red shade with a little bit of titanium white and a tiny amount of yellow ochre. So I now want to show you our little fellow here. We have a special guest that comes to our house, and through the kitchen on the other side of there's a little moth here you'll see, but only at night. We have our own Mr. Gray TF, and he's actually a gray tree frog here in Iowa. And this clever fella sits on the window at night when the kitchen light is on, and he will go and eat insects. So that's our little friend, Mr. Gray TF. So what I'm painting for you here today is a red-eyed tree frog, and he is found in the rainforest, all in Central America, Mexico, Colombia, all in that area. He has little suction cup toes, just like our little Mr. Gray tree frog from Iowa. They have these on their digits, on their toes in the front and in the back. I guess technically they're called, let's see, I had it written down. They're called digits on the front, and they're called toes in the back. But this little guy here, he is a carnivore like other tree frogs are, and they like to eat at night like our Mr. Tree Frog in Iowa. But they really like high temperatures and super high humidity. They like anywhere from 80 to 100% humidity. And this little guy is, I'm painting him actually quite a bit larger than he is. In real life, he's only a few inches long. So I want to talk a little bit about the grid method. Sometimes when I'll go in and do a painting or a drawing, I will just look at it and just kind of eyeball it. But in this case, this tree frog, I've never painted a tree frog before, so I'm not familiar with all of the shapes. So I had to really study him and study the reference photo. And so making a grid, if you take a grid and you go in and divide all of the shapes up into smaller shapes, and then when you're on your canvas, you look and you say, what's in this rectangle? And then you transfer it over, and that way you can go much larger, much smaller than your reference photo. And when you draw, then follow the angles of the drawing that you're using. Follow the angles, and you can see here I've got 4 squares across and 4 squares down, and then I made little tick marks where I could see on my drawing. I could make little tick marks and then be able to make a more accurate drawing. Hopefully that makes sense. So, but I will have to say, don't do what I did when I first started my drawing. The canvas I've got here is a 12 inches tall by 16 inches wide, and the paper that I was using is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that I printed the photo off on my computer. And then when I'm painting, I also have my computer monitor up so I can look and see the colors, because my printer paper was a little dull in color. But anyway, when I'm painting this thing or drawing it, what I was doing was I had not transferred the proportions of the rectangles. So for example, the canvas that I'm working with is longer than it is tall. And the reference photo that I was using, the proportion of that was 8.5 by 11, and I was doing a 16 by 12, which is actually a longer spread out proportion. So what I did was, when I was making my frog, he was coming out too tall, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, I've got my proportion wrong. So once I corrected that, then I was able to finish with the drawing. So that's just something to watch out for when you're working, just to make sure that you've got the same proportions. Otherwise, when you transfer your rectangle to rectangle and make the proportions, then it won't come out true to the actual reference. So now coming in with a little Diarylide Yellow, I'm going to now indicate on our tree frog the lightest areas on his, let's see, now those areas in the front are called, what were they? I wrote them down. The digits. The digits, and then the back are the toes. Adding a little bit of this Pyrrole orange. When I started with the Pyrrole orange, I realized I had it a little bit too bright and too saturated. So I'm going to add a little of a yellow ochre here and mix up a color that is going to be a little bit more neutral. There we go. And then just wiping that off on a paper towel, the extra off of the knife, keeping the knife clean. So I can see already this is a better color by mixing it with the yellow ochre. That made a more neutral color. It's still bright, but it's not vulgar or garish. There's so many bright colors on this little guy that wanted to make sure to not have everything too bright. Just using the same round brush. This is a synthetic brush, and I'm holding the brush, trying to hold the brush closer at the end of the paintbrush, not at the ferrule. Now I got paint where I didn't want it, so I just took a little bit of water and that flat brush and just wipe the paint right off. If you paint it at that moment and wipe it off right away, you can get it up and there'll be no trace. So now I need to darken the color, and to darken this color I'm going to add a little bit of the Pyrrole orange and the Diarylide purple together to make kind of a chocolatey dark color. Add a little bit more orange here, and I'm mixing again. Just since I'm mixing a tiny amount of paint, I can mix right with my brush, being careful to not let the paint get up into the ferrule. The ferrule is that metal wrap that goes between the brush, the bristles themselves, and the handle. We don't want to get that up into that metal ferrule. Now, part of his foot here is in shadow, and so I'm going to use that dark color that we mixed to show that's in shadow underneath his chin. And just dipping the brush in the water, and that can make the paint flow a little more smoothly. There we go. And then using that dark chocolatey color to show any of the toes that are in shadow underneath his thigh. Right over here by the hind limb, some of the toes are kind of hiding in here. Get those marked in. And I'm looking at my reference photo as I'm painting. I want to make sure that I'm following my drawing, but I'm also looking at the original photo reference. So do you have a favorite animal that you like to paint or draw? Let me know in the comments below. Love to hear from you and love to hear all your comments. So a little bit more about the Totally Awesome Challenge. As long as you put the words Totally Awesome Challenge in your title and your subject is a frog or a toad, all art types, all mediums, all ages are welcome to join in, and I'll be doing a playlist, so be looking for the playlist on my channel that will have all of the artists who participate will be in this playlist. And also be looking for upcoming challenges, art challenges, on my channel here on YouTube. Now just a little bit of primary yellow. So this is a super colorful frog. God makes all these wonderful animals, and this guy is very colorful. So I'm using some of that gray. So underneath, he's white underneath, but depending on where the light is sitting, that white might look like gray, like underneath his chin here. Look how dark that is, that we need to put that white color. It needs to be almost like a dark charcoal gray to be convincing. There's an old adage in painting is paint what you see, not what you know. So if I know that underneath his chin is white, I might be tempted to paint white under there, but what I just need to do is paint the colors that I see. So now some of the green gold and the primary yellow, I'm going to mix up some colors now that'll be used for the top of his body and the sides of his body. You can make a really nice natural green using Mars Black and primary yellow. Now a little of the titanium white. More of the yellow. And it might seem like I'm really mixing up that the colors can't all be used on that same frog, but it's interesting how when light and shadow are hitting on any subject, you're going to get a variety of warm and cool colors and darks and lights. So I want to be sure to include that full range of colors that I'm seeing in the photo in the paint. So we're getting all of those colors on here, and then now it's a matter of putting them on our Mr. Frog. So I'm starting here first with this tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane is what we would think of as the ear. And now behind the eyes with the darkest color. So let me know if you've ever kept a toad or a frog as a pet. When our children were little, Will and John, they were both in Boy Scouts. And so one of the projects that they had is they had to keep a toad or a frog for one of the badges they were working on. And so we live over right next to a pond. And so we had kept some American bullfrogs in a small aquarium and kept them in the garage. Well, these guys, when they were tadpoles, it was one thing, but then when they became full frogs, we had to feed them. And so we were spending a lot of time catching insects for these guys. They really like to eat moths and crickets and moths and that kind of thing, but especially they'd like to eat a moth or any kind of a flying insect. So we were sitting there with a butterfly net catching at night, catching all of these insects for those frogs. And then finally when they were old enough then, and they had done enough with the merit badge, then we were able to release them back into the wild. But it was a lot of fun and taking care of those guys. Alright, so now going in and working on the back of the frog's body, on his trunk. And I'm using the lightest green that we mixed up here for these highlight areas where the sun is hitting. Right along the mouth area. And then just blending in with a, that brush was a dry brush. Going again with the lightest color on the thigh. And then also on the hind limb. So there's the thigh and then that hind limb back there. And I don't have any additives mixed in with my acrylic paint. This is just acrylic paint right out of the tube. And then just, dipping it occasionally in water if we need it to flow a little better. I'm coming in with a Phthalo Blue Red shade over the top of the mixture that was made with Ultramarine Blue and White. Now adding a tiny bit of black to the green and working on that tympanic membrane again. Get a shape going for there we go. There's the tympanic membrane, that little area right behind. And we'll get the color back on that again, kind of a round shape. And I saw some blue highlights on the top of the animal, so I'm going to put that same light blue color that I see in the photo. I'm going to include that, but because we did the white, layered the white below, then that will make it kind of stand out a little bit more. Some more blue accents. Now coming in with the gray. Defining around the eye. Here we go. Darken that area. And a highlight around the mouth. So I tell you what I was planning to originally do is I was going to be putting this frog on the green surface, the green leaf, like the photo showed. And as I was working on the painting, and he's just on the toned canvas, the yellow ochre, I thought, I'm really liking how this is looking. So what I ended up doing is I thought, I'm just going to leave him on the toned canvas and not do anything more to him. I'm not going to put him on a leaf. I like this, so all ended up doing is erasing. And I regretted pressing down so hard with my pencil lines when I did my grid, but that was kind of a lesson learned. You never know when you're going to change your direction and do different colors. So just using a soft, clean, dry brush and then just wiping off the extra scrapings from the eraser. That was a jet eraser I was using, but on the canvas. That way I could, keep the drawing the way it was and not have to add any layers on top. So now, in order to sign the painting, I'm taking Mars Black and some water. We could also do it with medium, but I'm just adding a tiny bit of water and then using a liner brush and giving it a test to see if it's the right consistency. I'm looking for something that is like the consistency of ink to sign the painting. Well, I hope that you'll be participating in the Totally Awesome Challenge, and I look forward to seeing your artwork. And I'm really glad that you're here, and thank you so much for visiting. Till next time, it's Dena Tollefson. Bye-bye.